Hey guys, this is Locke. This is going to be my review of Hasna, the Serpentine Aromaz. At least that's what it says over here. I actually think Hasna is quite strong in a vacuum. Like, if you just look at her, she has a very strong skill set, except for one critique, which I'll get to in a bit. But I think there are other factors other circumstances that actually make her mostly a skip. But it doesn't have to do with the character, but other things like other characters in the pipeline and the stage of the game that we're getting her released at, things like that. But first, we're going to start to look at her skills, and we're going to talk about her and how to play her, and then I'll talk about the unfortunate thing about her skill. Like, there's one critique about her skill, and we'll get to that. But anyway, let's take a look at her. So she has a very similar trait to Magnus. Both of them, they have an aura that they can apply to heroes, enemies, within certain tiles. Like at 1 star, it's within 3 tiles, and then at 3 stars, it's 4 tiles, and at 5 stars, it's 5 tiles. So this fragrance, this aura, reduces the attack and defense of enemies within those tiles. So say we're talking about just a 1 star, because that's where we start at. So for 1 star, Hasna will lower all the enemies that are around her's attack and defense by 8%. Same with Magnus. Magnus also does the exact same thing. And the unfortunate thing is these two do not stack. So you can't bring both of them and get minus 16%. You just get one instance of the aura. So you only get 8%. Hasnas is actually stronger than Magnus because regardless of the star level, she also increases the chance of critically hitting enemies by 15%. So this is actually even better than a 15% crit aura because it'll stack. So if you bring lightning, lightning has, I think, a 30% crit aura, so that will stack with this crit debuff chance something. So basically, if you have both of them together, your allies will now have a 45% chance to crit because 30% from lightning and then 15% from Hasna. If this is instead just plus 15% crit to your heroes, that would actually be a little bit negative because it doesn't stack with other crit auras, right? And even at 1 star, you gain that 15% crit. So this actually I find is a really nice trait because a lot of people also pulled for Cocoa, and Cocoa is increasing your crit rate by 30%. She also increases your crit damage as well. So pairing Cocoa and Hasna, you're going to be doing a lot more crits for your whole team because they both apply AoEs, right? So I find that she synergizes well with the crit build, with the crit team. She also applies hidden fragrance to all enemies, and this hidden fragrance debuff is really important for her. If enemies don't have hidden fragrance, she actually becomes not so useful. Like, you really need to apply this on enemies to get the best use out of her. And therein lies one of the problems. So I told you that, there's one critique. That is the critique. So this hidden fragrance applies on enemies when the enemies end their turn. So what that means is enemies will have to come close to Hasna. So at the 1 star, they have to come and end their turn within 3 spaces of Hasna to then get this hidden fragrance debuff. So if you starting the game and your enemies are they're not going to move until you go close to them, let's say, right? So on your first turn, although you can attack with Hasna, she's not going to be doing a lot. Like, she's not going to be getting off her main mechanics on the enemies, including the uh, attack and defense decrease on the enemies until they take and end their turn. So on your first turn, if you're acting before them, you actually don't get to do much. Like, you don't get your main mechanics, you don't get your hidden fragrance mechanics. And I feel like that's a pretty significant negative for her. It is the one critique that I have, but I feel like that is a pretty significant critique because it does kind of lower your tempo. I mean, maybe for things like boss fights, it doesn't matter because the first turn you're kind of, always getting into position or something like that. So for those kind of things, it doesn't matter. But in other cases where you have to, if your turn counts, you have to watch every turn, or you have to do as much damage as possible, like for example, a Tower of Adversity, that might be a negative because you can't really do much on your first turn. You have to kind of go and wait a little bit close to them to let the enemies come and approach you within 3 or 4 or 5 tiles, and stay there, so that the next turn when Hasna does something, okay, now you're getting the hidden fragrance debuff. So that is, to be honest, I think that's unfortunate. Like if there was a different way it applied the debuff, that would have been better. So if you are doing that, now you have to then, like if you do want to get this debuff off on the first turn, then you have to use this skill, which will inflict it on an enemy and enemies within 2 tiles of it. But then you're using the skill, um, you're using this skill, and then you have to wait your turn, so you don't have, you can't use another skill unless you're using Act Again, but then you'll probably want to use Act Again on other heroes like August or something. So overall, like I said, the tempo just slows down. You have to make changes to your team to work it to make her fit in it. So that, I feel, is the one and only critique that I have of her as a character in general, because I feel like that's too bad. But aside from that, she has a lot of crit, and this skill, penetrating, is a very very strong skill. So most of the time you will, when you're using her, except for that first turn, I'm gonna assume that enemies usually have that hidden fragrance debuff. So this skill will hit for 170% of attack, and she also gets an additional 15% crit and crit damage, so that 170% actually is increased by 15% more, so that's close to 185% now, right? And enemies will have 15% less defense, so this is going to hit really really hard. On top of that, she has a passive that whenever enemies have hidden fragrance and you attack them, you get 2 energy back. So naturally, every turn you're getting 1 energy. If you're attacking an enemy with this hidden fragrance, you're getting 2 more. So every turn, she's basically able to regenerate 3 energy, and this skill only costs 4 energy. So she's able to use high cost skills pretty often and do a lot of damage. Like, she is going to be a very fantastic boss killer, to be honest, because she's able to basically always keep the boss debuffed, right? After the first turn, you can keep the boss debuffed forever and do a lot of damage, and you don't have to worry about energy issues. With some other heroes, energy issues is a thing. You have to bring Urgent Order, or you have to bring other support heroes that can give them energy. With Hasna, she's able to get 3 energy every turn, and so I think it works out to like once every 3 or 4 turns you have to wait or do a basic attack or something, and go from there. So she is able to do a lot of single target damage. That's the great thing about her. She has a few skills. One is a 2 energy skill. She also has a 3 energy skill that does 150% of attack, and does lifesteal as well. That's 3 energy, and then she has this skill which does 4 energy. Of the 3, I think this is the best one because it has the best range and has the best damage, and she regens energy, a lot of energy anyway. So I would recommend this skill over the other 2. Um, she also has another passive that's pretty important to talk about as well, which we can see in the character trial. So I'm going to go to the character trial for a second just to show you that. Okay, so the other passive that she has, Send Tracker. Um, this one, I think this is honestly the best build that you could probably get, like what they have here in our trial. Both of these passives. So the second passive, what it does is that if there's an enemy within 4 tiles of her, she gains crit 2, so which is 30% crit buff. And she increases the maximum range by 1 and allows moving 2 more tiles after landing a critical hit. With the 30% crit rate that you get from here and the 15% that you get from her trait, that's already 45% crit. If you like, it's probably not too difficult to get her up to a very high crit rate. You can build things like the crit tarot, the justice tarot. That's another 15%. If you're bringing cocoa, you get another 30% from that. So, that's already at 90% crit rate, right? So, oftentimes you're going to be critting with her. She's not meant to be a tank, although her reaction decreases damage by 30%. That's good for like an extra survival. She might get, she doesn't die to one hit now, but she's not really built to be a tank. She's supposed to be, you know, um, like a kiter. It's like she attacks from far away, and then she moves back 2 steps after that. And when enemies come towards her again, and they're approaching her, so they wait. So as soon as they wait, her trait takes effect, and they are marked with a hidden fragrance, and now she can do a lot of insane damage and then move back again, right? So that's basically her play style. And so this, I believe, is the best way of building her. These three skills. Um, what about her basic attack? So her basic attack does 90% of magical damage, but if you're standing right next to your target, like if you're adjacent, so if you're standing, for example, in this spot and attacking this guy here, then you will additionally do 50% of um, attack as physical damage. So why that's important is if the enemy has a high magical defense value but low physical value, so the first part of the damage will be magical damage, and then it'll be physical damage. And the physical damage is also guaranteed to be a critical hit. So even the basic attack can be pretty strong. But the only thing is, you probably won't be using it too often. You probably be using the other one, this one, the penetrating skill, more often, because she's going to be getting a lot of energy, and this one just hits a lot harder. So although this one has pretty good modifiers for a basic attack, you're still probably going to be using this one anyway. So this one is probably going to be used on the turns where you don't have um, on the, I think, once every 4 turns, I think, or 3 turns, where you need to get extra energy. And when you do attack with them, if the enemies are marked with that scent, you will you will gain 2 more energy anyway. So even on the turns that you're attacking with this, you're getting 3 energy. Um, this Hasna in this trial, she has the focus wand, so she gets an extra range. So I want to wait right here so you can see what the range will look like when these guys are marked. So here we can see her range with this skill is 5 tiles, right? And you can also attack through enemies. Sometimes, like with the bow skills, unless it's a curved shot, you cannot attack through them. You have to attack, like, you can get blocked by obstacles. This skill is great because, like, as you can see, I can attack right here, and even though this guy's in the way, I can still target this guy. And yes, so with her 2 passives, so this passive increases her range by 1, and then the focus wand that she has right now is increasing the range by 1 more. This one has a range of 3, but now it becomes 5. So she's kind of starting to play a little bit like Nungle. Like, she's able to have very, very high range and deal a lot of crit damage. Like, that's basically the damage that Nungle does as well. She has very high crit modifiers and crit damage modifiers. So similarly, Hasna also has, crit 10 crit damage kind of playstyle, doing a lot of damage from very far range. Um, so I mean, I think that's really all I should like. I think that should probably convey all the ideas about her. She's a very, very strong single target attacker that can attack from far range. Um, the only thing is you have to wait for the first turn. Like the first turn, the enemies have to come into range to get hit by that debuff, and then she's gonna shine. That's the only thing. So it's just the first turn, which sometimes is a big deal. Like, in boss fights, it's not a big deal, but in other fights and maybe Tower of Adversity, it might be a big deal to have to wait. And also in other content like the regular tower, um, like if you have enemies like all over the place, you might go and defeat one group of enemies, and now the second group of enemies you have to go approach them and then again wait for 1 turn and things like that. So that could be a negative in in other content aside from boss fights. Okay, now I said there are some negative circumstances, so let's talk about that. So if this game was starting right now, like if this is a launch right now, and she was the character on the banner instead of Cole, a lot of people would probably say she's very strong because she is. She is a really strong character. Um, but at this point in the game, it's been 100 days. The game is out. We have so many damage dealers. Do I really need another single target magic damage dealer? Probably not. I mean, myself, I already have Nungle and Barrel. I think Hasna would probably do more single target damage than Barrel, but Barrel is probably good enough for most content. And in addition to that, Barrel can also do AoE damage with where did that go? With the boom. Where did my boom skill? Oh, here it is. Yeah, with this skill, she can also do AoE damage. She's not only limited to single target damage, and she also has a very, very high energy restore. And if you don't have Barrel, but you happen to have Nungle, Nungle is also very similar in the sense that she's also able to do a lot of magic damage from a distance. Now I find Hasna is more suited to doing hit and run, like because after she hits, she can move back. She's a very mobile kind of character, where Nungle is not. But again, like for that little difference, do I really want to spend limited resources on Hasna? I mean, again, it's probably not. But if this was a launch character, I think she would be really really strong because she can do a lot of damage. I think she's probably going to do more damage than Barrel, single target damage, but I feel Nungle will probably do more damage than Hasna. I might be wrong about that, but I have a feeling I'm not going to be able to test it because I don't have Hasna. I don't really plan on getting Hasna, but my gut feeling is that Nungle will probably do a little bit more single target damage than Hasna. But Hasna has more mobility, so I think that's fair. It's a fair trade-off. So I think that's one of the reasons why Hasna is not a high priority is because of the stage in the game where she is now. Like there is a lot of damage dealers in the game already, and two were just released right before Hasna, which are top tier. Like you have August and your Sophia, and both of them are top tier DPS already. So a lot of people did pull for one or the other or both. And if you have that already, do you really need another damage dealer? Because I mean, for most fights, you can only bring maybe five or sometimes six characters. And if you already have two DPS, you probably want to bring like a tank and supports and healing now, right? What's the point of bringing a third damage dealer? So I feel for that circumstance, she's probably lower on people's priority list. But if she was a launch character, I think she would be pretty high because she does pretty fantastic single target damage. Like if you're doing the boss trial for the first time, she's going to be very, very helpful. So if there are new players that are looking at this and you did not pull for August, you did not pull for Sophia because you just started the game now, let's say. So this is probably a very strong character for you because she is probably going to help you to do a lot of content as a very strong single target damage dealer. What are other things? Okay, so another problem with her is just all the banners that we just had and the banners that are coming up make it really hard to pull for every character, right? Because August was very strong. A lot of people wanted to pull for him. A lot of people wanted to pull for Sophia. With Cocoa, not too long before that, we have Homa coming up after her. And all of these characters are very, high priority. So with these high priority characters, and then you have Hasna, it's hard to justify the resources to spend on her. For me personally, that's the position I'm in. I find she's pretty cool. Like she would probably be a fun character to play with. I really like the playstyle of using Nungle. I had a lot of fun playing with her, and I feel like Hasna would probably be similar, but I, I don't have the resources to try to also now make sure I get her because I also want to get Homa. So now who do I get? That's the problem where I'm at, and I feel like a lot of other people are also in a similar position. You probably like her. You'll be like, hey, she seems cool. play the trial, you think she's strong, and she does seem pretty strong in the trial. But the problem is the limited amount of pulling currency that we have, and so now we have to prioritize who we're going to pull from the amount of currency that we have. And so I feel like, again, that is putting her a bit lower on people's priority list than otherwise you would have. And then I think the final problem with her, in my opinion, is her factions. I don't know why she only has Drifter and a Clarity as factions. I mean, I do know why, because she's not in any of the three main factions. But I feel like that kind of sucks. Because, I mean, even if you look at, say, Cole, right? Where did Cole go? Cole has those two factions as well, like Clarity and Drifter, but Cole also has the Papal States, so she can be used in a Papal build. I mean, you can bring Samantha, or I think Suppression also has the Papal buff, so you can bring any of these two characters and build a whole team around Papal States. And I think Claris is coming out with an even better faction buff. So, Papal States, Union, and Ira, those are the three main factions that people are building around. So now to suddenly get a character that doesn't have any of those three factions, it's like extra stats that you're missing out on, you know? So I feel like that's also a negative for her. I feel like that's a bit like extenuating circumstance. Like maybe later on you'll get a very strong drifter leader or something. But right now, that's not the case. And so for that, I feel like that also counts as a negative. I really wish, like, I know it doesn't make sense story wise because she comes from the merchant whatever storyline. So that's the reason why she doesn't have. I think it's similar with Akambe as well. But Akambe, like, let me see. Yeah, Akambe also similar. He has discipline and drifter, but he's a disciplined leader, so you can actually build a team around him, right? And that's what I did. Like I'm using him with Edda and Sophia to be able to um, use use the discipline buff, and he does really well with the buff, sorry, the leader buff and his summons. He increases their damage a lot, like pretty significantly. So using this leader buff on himself and then his teammates that are disciplined makes a lot of sense. However, with her, you know we don't really get that. So I feel like that's a bit of a negative with her. And again, that's also pulling it a little bit lower in my priority list. Like, just for argument's sake, let's just say she was in Papal States, then I would be more inclined to pull her a little bit, because I would be like, oh, I want to use a Papal States team to do this. Like, I want to use that to, I don't know, do something. I don't usually have that same thought with the Clarity or with drifters. I don't look at some content and say, oh, I just want to use a drifter team for this. Usually not. I mean, there are some people that really like drifters and they like using them, but personally for me, it's not a thing. Um, I don't know. I just don't like them so much. Um, and same with Clarity. Clarity, I mean, Cole has a very strong buff that would also work with her, because Cole's buff increases crit rate and crit damage by 15%. So it would work with her. But now, at the stage of the game we're in, Cole no longer has a strong presence in the game. Like, Cole isn't needed because enemies are usually not able to get one shot by Cole anymore. So Cole is not used so much. So you have to now bring Cole just for the leader buff to buff Hasna, and Cole is ineffective. So again, like, your whole team is now, like, you're really trying hard to make your team work around Hasna. Whereas, for example, if you have Sophia or August, you can put those two in any team and they'll probably work. But with Hasna, now you have to actually build a team for the purposes of like this buff. Sure, like August works better in Union teams, but even otherwise, he works pretty well. Same with Sophia. But anyway, I think that's it for this review. I think she is, looking at her by herself, I think she is a pretty strong single target damage dealer. But because of when she's being released 100 days later into the game, where a lot of people already have built out DPS characters, she's not. I don't think she'll be too much of a priority because there isn't anything interesting that she can do. If you compare her to Sophia, for example, Sophia also does a lot of damage, right? But she also is able to dodge. She can do unlimited dodge for a turn. You can also bring this cooldown down from 3 to 1, and so you can keep reusing it, and she will apply vulnerability as she dodges. She will do some damage. She's able to summon an additional unit. She's able to give all your units 15% extra attack. So she's able to do a lot of stuff, and even while she's doing all that, she will still be doing damage with her trait, pretty significant damage. With with Hasna, yes, she will do damage. She'll probably do more damage with her single target abilities than Sophia will with her trait if it's just one enemy. But that's all she does. She just does damage, and then that's it. Like, okay, I guess the extra 15% attack and defense and crit is okay. Like, okay, that is something, but I don't think that's enough. And the extra 15% crit is also increases your team do more damage. Same with the defense down, but I feel like that's just not enough at this stage in the game to put her more priority. If you are starting out, if you're a new player, if you're starting out, I think then it makes sense for you to get Hasna because she is a strong damage dealer, and you do need strong damage dealers to do content in the game. So that's it for my review. If you think there's something I missed or did not look at, please let me know, and I will see you guys next time.